You're listening to Everything Out There with your host, Steve Stockton.
Hello, friends. Now, the ghost of Christmas Past, a spectral figure who appears in Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, is more than just a spooky apparition. This enigmatic being serves as a powerful symbol of memory, regret, and the potential for redemption. By leading Ebenezer Scrooge on a journey through his past, the ghost forces him to confront the choices that shaped him, ultimately paving the way for his transformation. This spirit embodies the enduring power of memory. We see Scrooge revisit key moments, his lonely childhood, his joyful apprenticeship with Fezziwig, and the heartbreaking dissolution of engagement to Bella. These scenes are not mere nostalgia, they are visceral experiences that reawaken dormant emotions within Scrooge. He is forced to remember the joy and love he once felt, feelings long buried under layers of bitterness and avarice. The ghost demonstrates that the past is not simply gone, it lives within us, shaping our present and influencing our future. More importantly, the ghost of Christmas Past evokes the sting of regret. Scrooge witnesses his younger self, full of hope and optimism, and then mourns the man that he has become. He sees the consequences of his choices, particularly the prioritization of wealth over love, leading to Belle's departure. This confrontation with past mistakes is crucial for Scrooge's transformation. Regret, though painful, can be a powerful catalyst for change. It allows us to acknowledge our errors and motivates us to seek a better path. Ultimately, the ghost of Christmas Past offers a glimmer of hope for redemption. While the past cannot be changed, confronting it allows for understanding and acceptance. By revisiting his past, Ebenezer Scrooge gains crucial self-awareness. He sees the roots of his miserly behavior and recognizes the potential for a different future. This realization sets the stage for his transformation later in the story. The ghost, therefore, serves as a reminder that it is never too late to learn from the past and strive for redemption.
In the chill of winter's night, the fire's burning bright, echoes of laughter fill the air, shadows dance in light. Whispers from the yesteryears, memories that last, they come to haunt the silent halls, ghosts of Christmas past. Ooh, the ghosts of Christmas past, bringing stories from the cold, of the brave and of the bold, reminding us of times gone by, of love that used to last. As we gather round the tree, we hear their whispers fast. The songs we sang in harmony, the joy of love displayed, yet shadows linger in the night, where hopes and dreams once played. They tell of tales forgotten, of love lost in the frost, but we treasure every moment, for nothing's ever lost. Ooh, the ghosts of Christmas.
Hello, everybody. Steve Stockton here with you. Everything out there on the Clyde Lewis Ground Zero Radio Network. Recording this on a Friday the 13th, almost a full moon, and strange drones are filling the skies, at least here over the East Coast and other parts of the country, too. Got them in my neck of Massachusetts, just a little bit over. Cisco Murdoch and I did a show about that last weekend, and I don't know, interesting times. But I mentioned Cisco. She's going to be with me here tonight, and we're going to be talking about the ghosts of Christmas Past. Not necessarily the variety Scrooge encountered, but maybe so. Let me go ahead and bring her in here, and we'll take off. Cisco, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I've got, visions of suspicious drones dancing around my head for Christmas time here in New Jersey and on the shore. So that's fun. I'd rather see reindeer and Santa Claus, or even the tooth fairy.
Well,
But
I clipped that the other night on your show that Santa's replaced his reindeer with a bunch of drones, and that's how he's going to deliver presents this year. That way, he can have several of them going at once and just deliver presents all over and get his job home, get done, and get home back to Ms. Claus in a quarter of the time that it used to take him to fly around the world in his sleigh with his reindeer.
sometimes progress isn't the best thing. I like the old Rudolph with the blinky nose, and Dancer and Prancer and Vixen and all that. I like the magic of it. I always felt that way about Christmas. I think the way you feel about holidays is the way you were brought up, with the family that you were brought up with. If you had, whatever your past is, your Christmas's past. That's how you're going to, I think, go at holidays. But I've seen people go the opposite too, like people who didn't celebrate much as, growing up for whatever reason, either, belief or just, situation. Sometimes just, headlong in with what they missed, and they're the most holiday spirited people you've ever met. So, there's, I guess, what I'm trying to say is holidays can be a mixed bag for everybody. Not everybody's excited to see them. Some people are very sad. And I think that that's one reason we're doing this show. We try to do a show around this time every year since we've known each other, because we know it's hard for some people with holidays. So we try to put out, alternative information on, hey, if you don't see the Christmas spirit, if you're not witnessing it around you, be that. You can change the energy in a room. You can change the energy in uh, a workplace or a situation. Just being crazy or wearing funny Rudolph ears, or maybe give everybody a little gift of just one year I bought a dozen carnations. There were 10 people at the registers when I went in, and everybody got a red carnation. Merry Christmas. Just something to make them feel like somebody remembered them. You could do little things. Go volunteer somewhere or something like that. If your family situation is kind of messed up. I've spent Christmases and Thanksgivings in weird places, and on guard duty when I was in the military, and out, pulling service or whatever, and different perspective on the 60 plus Christmases that I've had. And some of them have been absolutely spectacular, but I found out some of them have been more not in a great place. I've
Yeah.
been in both and missing people. But one of the cool things about having some of the abilities that I have is that I know that your loved ones, they're there when you think of them. They're there when you talk about them, and they hear you. Even if it's just for a split second, they can connect into that energy, and you kind of almost feel them, like, always picture them like looking down, but of course, or sideways, however you want to envision it. Let's just say for purposes, looking down from the clouds and smiling, when they hear a happy memory. But you and I have always talked about, if you're positive, it gives them positive energy. They can send it back. They don't like to see us sad. So if you're not going to do it for yourself, to try to put on a happy face if you can, or something, then do it for them. Because we talked an awful lot about how when you send them happy thoughts and energy, it helps them, it lifts them and it lifts you. So that's what we're trying to put out for the holidays this year. Lift yourself up. You can lift up your loved ones too that are on the other side.
Good deal. And just like you, I had some happy Christmases growing up, and then there's been a few that were, melancholy, but and you miss people around the holidays, and there is such a thing, a seasonal affective disorder and things like that. A lot of people get those holiday blues. Some of the most difficult ones for me was the one right after my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, the one who shaped me in so many ways, right after she passed away. And then, of course, when my own parents passed away within 32 days of each other. That was a 1-2 punch, and then the Christmas right after that was just sad beyond belief. But it's you never ever completely get over it, but it does get easier. I think time doesn't heal that wound, but it makes it a little more distant.
Mm. I think it's too because as if you're lucky enough on this journey to reach into an older age where you can look back, nothing teaches you like experience, and bad experience teaches the best. I mean, it's like bad choices taught me the best lessons.
Yeah,
It's like those
boy, ain't
millions of
that the
people.
truth?
Yeah, but some of my wonderful people that in my life, drill sergeants and just different people, and motivational people who were skilled in the knowledge and what would take the time to teach. Somebody like a really good teacher or a really good drill sergeant or a really good whoever your mentor may be, and you look at them and go, man, I'm having a really bad time. This part of my life is just so messed up. There's so many just crappy things happening. And that person look at you and go, good. And you go, what do you mean good? Well, good, because that's when all the good stuff happens. That's when all the good lessons happen. That's when the teaching moments happen. That's when you excel and you raise your vibration and you raise your wisdom, or you don't. You fail and you drop lower, and then you have more chance to learn and to become. And I think that that's like, it's almost like a human demasking. You know what I mean? It's like you just forge that metal of your human life so much that you become, not so much hardened, but armored,
Mhm.
against the idiot
Big difference
choices you
between
made. Yeah.
being hardened and being armored. I like that. I'm going to steal that from you, probably.
You can have it, sweetie. And you can have it, because that's what it is. It's like, okay, here's the meme version for everybody that listens. Like, if you're a TikToker, Twitter, Twatter, X, whatever you want to call it, the short version would be, don't blame other people for the road you're on. That's your own asphalt.
Yep. I like that. It took me a minute there. I'm kind of slow tonight. It's almost 9 o'clock here on the East Coast, and I've had a busy day with
Ain't that
the
a
little
keeper?
one and everything. And it's your own asphalt. I love it.
Ain't that a keeper? But boy, isn't it true? And it just
It
goes so
is.
much with my podcast, Journey Through the Gate. The journey is you, baby. That's the road you're taking. What path are you on? By the time you get to the gate, what's on the other side? We're gonna have to find out together.
Yeah.
And bringing people on to try to sort that. People ask all the time, gatekeeper. What do you mean? Because that's usually a term that I think has gotten a little tarnished. It's like you always say, the
Yeah, like a
gatekeepers won't let me
celebrity thing or
yeah,
somebody,
yeah,
an executive or something. You try to
right,
call somebody, you have to get past the gatekeeper. But
right,
this
right.
is a different type of gatekeeper
Mhm.
that you got. Explain a little bit about your
Sure,
show and the premise there for people that probably haven't heard it or might not have heard it. And we'll
absolutely.
see if we can get some more people to come listen to you. And I
Sure.
also want to note that you're now on Rumble and you're doing some incredible things over there.
I'm having a ball. I love Rumble. I love the free speech. I love being able to. I want to say it's Cisco Unplugged, but it's more. I'm like, I'm plugged in, baby. We're going full electric because
Cisco Unhinged, maybe.
unhinged. There you go. There you go. I like that. I'm keeping that one. So, but because that's the thing, you have to be. I can't believe I wore a uniform to protect, people's free speech, and now you got to, be careful what you say and all that. Look, I have more faith in human beings to be able to discern and decipher on their own. Here's the information. Here's the facts as I know it. Here's what I think. Here's what might be. I mean, I'm trying to be honest about it. And what a place to do it is in the paranormal. So basically, I started a show because I was sick and tired of hearing people lie about ghosts and telling people with hurt hearts and questions these definitive answers that they had a little wiggle room to them. It's like when you say all of this and all of that and all people like this and all types of this, I think you're always making a mistake when you do that, and you do that with ghosts too. So I wanted to start a show where I gave ghosts a little bit more of the room they needed. There's so much more depth to the paranormal and metaphysical, the supernatural, and everybody was emphasizing on all the scary, dark things, which are there, but they're missing the miracles. They're missing the fun and the wonder of it all, and they're also missing the part that, hey, yo, guess what? You're a future ghost. Do you want to be what type of spirit do you want to be? Do you want to be a spirit? Do you want to be an earthbound ghost? And so I started a show based on, okay, well, how does a ghost become a ghost? A ghost becomes a ghost because of their journey in life, things they picked up. And I always think about it like we're wearing these big long trench coats with lots of pockets, and through life you put all these big rocks or pebbles in your pocket, and you carry around these burdens, regrets, things you didn't say, things you should have done, could have done, shouldn't have done, and all of this stuff, and the anger, whatever it may be, the lower vibrational things. And that's what keeps you earthbound and tethered to the earthly realm, let's put it that way, the heavier vibrations. And the lighter you are, the higher vibration you go out on. If you can take care of some of those things, you're a little lighter, like you're cutting away some of the weights on the balloon. And I learned a long time ago that it has to do with your journey and the choices that you make and the things that you do and your reaction to other people's things. And by the time you get to the gate, what's on the other side? Well, in my chat, and the people that listen to my show are trying to learn too, but they've learned some things along the way and they're willing to share those things. So very much like we look at it like they're not so much gatekeepers. They're standing at the gate to help you if you have a problem that they specialize in or they've gone through themselves. And I think that's the way the whole world is supposed to be. But when you get with the paranormal and the supernatural, people have a tendency to want to understand. So I think it was a great opportunity to do a show where people could come in, and if all you were interested in is ghost hunting, or you want to hear a great author or true crime or historical stuff we can learn from, that's the place to be. And I think we've done over the years. I think that we've talked about every possible type of ghost and
Just about.
situation.
How
And
long have you been going? How many years has it been now?
I'd say, when I first got started, well, right around when I met you. So, 8 years, 9 years, something like that.
Yeah, it's been a while. I was living in Portland, Oregon at the time, and Soraya Ascath, who does Where'd the Road Go, messaged me one day, and he messaged me, he said, I've got somebody I'd like for you to meet. I think you two would hit it off. And it was you. And we exchanged details and things. They ended up, I don't remember if you called me or I called you, but yeah, it was daylight. I was sitting on the back porch, and by the time we finished, it was well after dark, and I was starving. But yeah, we spent 7 hours on that first phone call.
We did.
And
We didn't even break for a pee. We didn't even break for a pee.
Yeah. Something I want to point out before I forget it. You're talking about that being like an overcoat with a lot of pockets in it. That reminded me of when I was a kid. There was a place in Middle Tennessee there over on the Cumberland Plateau where people went geode hunting. Geode is, for people who don't know, it's some kind of a rock formation. You break it open and it's full of quartz crystals and things like that. Well, my parents, especially my mom, decided she wanted to go geode hunting. So my dad knew the guy, and he said, I know just where to go. He said, there's a dry creek bed. Take you back in there, and you can pick up all you want. So we went, 3 of us. I was probably early teens at the time. We had 5-gallon buckets. And along the way up the creek bed, kept finding all these beautiful rocks, beautiful geodes and stuff. And my bucket got full. And by the time we're ready to turn around and head back, I couldn't carry the thing. So I had to pick and choose. Do I want this rock or this rock? I'm going to take this one out and leave it here. And I think that's what it is with that the pocket thing you were talking about.
Love it.
There comes a point where you've got to decide which rocks you want to keep and which rocks you want to leave behind.
Right. And the thing is, I want you to imagine that this holiday season, because there's people that'll sit there and everybody's having a good time, whatever. And I'm just thinking, and I get it. I've been there, and nobody can tell you how to grieve. But what I will tell you is this, is when you have a loved one over there, they're going to be affected more by the happy thoughts and memories and your laughter and the warmth that you feel when you remember them. Like if you can't do that, like close your eyes and imagine a hug, or just a happy memory you have, and just beam that out, because end on that note is what I mean. If you're going to start sad and you miss the person, start telling funny stories about how they lived and what they did, and all those kind of things, because you raise the vibration and you raise theirs, and it actually helps them. And that's just comes back to me from people that have abilities and are wiser than I will ever be, from all walks of life all around the globe, and they come back with the same message, that love is eternal, and that when you think of your loved ones, pet, four-legged or two-legged, and they know and they feel it, and it comes back to you. So if you had a choice to send bad vibes or good vibes, and you want that to come back to you, which one would you choose to send? Try to think about it that way. It's not going to make you miss them less or anything else, but we're talking about Christmases past, and I can tell you from experience, so I can look back over Christmas, because holidays are mile markers in our lifetime. And you look back and you can you can remember how you felt when your Aunt Dottie gave you the itchy sweater, when you had to wear it because your parent, your mom made you or whatever, and oh God,
I got a story to tell.
oh God, and the lace, for girls like me when I was little, it was the lace it looked really pretty, but it was hard to wear because it was really scratchy. And that was back in like the 60s, 70s, where we were wearing those flannel granny gowns and all that stuff around your neck. And you were like, oh my God, this is horrible. But you loved the season, as much as we kicked and screamed. But listen, I've had so many different ones in so many different places, because, when my mom passed, I was basically an orphan at 10. So I got very lucky, and I was able to live with my aunt and uncle through high school. I got so lucky. And then, after that, it was just, army and, bebopping around like, amazing different places, and you look back at those Christmases, you remember the tree or where you were, if you were over somebody's house or the dinner table, whatever it may be. But if you were lucky enough to have hand-me-down Christmas ornaments from when you were a kid, I was very lucky in that. I don't have anything else, but I managed through tornadoes and moving and everything else to have some of the Christmas ornaments my mother had from like 1940s. And one box now, I think, after the 60 years I've carted it around in my life, and a beautiful manger that's all was done in Italy, these plaster of Paris figurines and stuff that I can remember my mom taking out of a box when I was like 2, 3, 4 years old, and helping her put it together. So if you have something in your life like that, I don't care if it's a beautiful ribbon, or if it's Christmas ornaments, or if it's a raggedy wreath that you pull out every year because grandma hung it on her door, whatever it is that is precious. If you don't have that, I want you to look back in your tradition, your culture, the stories that your grandparents told, or that when you were a kid, and find a recipe or a tradition of telling a ghost story on Christmas Eve, or what it maybe pancakes and bacon breakfast before you open presents, or whatever tradition it might be, and keep that alive and instill it in your grandkids and your kids and your family, that this belongs to us, our family. This is what we did, and this is cool. And we need to keep it alive. And when they get married, maybe they'll put it into their family tradition and mix with their wife or husband or whoever. And that's what builds it. And holidays get that credit. And I think, Christmas and Hanukkah and Thanksgivings and different, those kind of holidays, they have so much family connection, that I think that's why it gets this stigma of being a sad time when it should be a happy time. And when you do those traditions, name those people. This was, such and such granny's ornament, bread dough ornament she made in the 70s. Remember, she was wacky. She used to watch all those craft shows, and tell a happy story about it. It's going to help you. It's going to help them. And I'll tell you, it connects to them. And that's when you're opening the vibration for those little miracles to happen, because you're riding on that love energy, and it's so much more powerful and full of light than the sad. And they can almost like reach through, and it's almost like getting a little peck on the cheek, a little kiss on the cheek, or a little hug, And before we're out of here tonight, I'll tell you about a Christmas hug. So Steve, remind me, and I'll tell it at the very end. But I just wanted to go into this show and give people a couple of tools to put in their toolbox, because it's a very busy time. Depending on where you are and who you are, you might be having financial troubles or fights we just got out of Thanksgiving. If you survived having family dinner this year, your Thanksgiving, you're doing good. Hang in there. You're going to get your warrior badge. You're getting your armor on. But I wanted to give you a couple tools to use this Halloween. I got Halloween. I can't wait for Halloween next year
You're
already.
only 2 months late.
I know. Well, no, I'm
Or maybe 10
I'm 10
months
months
early.
early. I'm
There you
10
go.
months early. So, but that's the main thing I want to put out there, because that's what the number one thing that the dead are dying to tell us is that love never dies. Love never dies, and you're going to see him again. So the way to draw that is to stay in that love energy. It's hard. You got to keep pulling yourself out sometimes, because you want to get out of your car and go bang on the window of the car that just cut you off. Can't do it. Can't stay in your car. Just sing, do something else to get distracted. Hang on to the wheel and pray to Jesus. Whatever you need to do, but do good. But choose good, and you're going to get that zap back. And it really is, you get what you put out. You attract what you put out. So if you're going to sit and say, why me, and miserable and think sad things, it's going to take a lot longer to dig yourself up out of that hole. Remember the guy in the hole story, Steve?
Yeah. And for those of you that haven't heard it or haven't heard me recount it, go ahead and tell them about that one, Cisco. I love this.
All right. So this guy, he's walking along. We'll call him Bob. So Bob's walking down the street, minding his own business, falls into a hole. And it's a deep hole. And Bob says, dang it, I was having a bad day, and now I've done fell in this hole, and I can't get out. Now he looks up and he sees how high up he's got to get, and there's no way. He's jumping, he's doing everything, he's trying to dig. Nope, can't get any traction on his feet, can't dig his way out of the hole. But he can still see people walking on the sidewalk, walking by. And the first guy that walks by is a police officer. And he says, hey, Mr. Policeman, I fell in this hole. Can you get me out? Can you get me out? And he's yelling and screaming. He sees him walk by. The policeman stops and looks through. What are you doing in the hole? That's not lawful. And he writes him a ticket, throws a ticket in the hole, and keeps on going. And then he sees another guy go by. And he says, hey, I fell in this hole. Can you help me out? The guy walks by and he said, well, isn't that stupid? You found, you weren't paying attention to what you were doing, and you fell in the hole, and you shouldn't let that happen again. I don't have any time. And he moved on, left him in the hole. And he's like all sad and everything. He doesn't know what to do, because he doesn't know how to get out of this hole. And everybody walks by and asks for help. They have their own thing in their mind, and they just keep going on about their business. And all of a sudden, he's about to lose hope. And he sees his friend, Steve. He's like, oh my God, is it Steve? Steve, I'm in this hole. Can you get me out of this hole? And Steve stops and he looks down. Bob, is that you? He said, yeah, man, I fell in this hole. I can't get out. And Steve just looks at me and goes, all right, man, all right. And then he jumps in the hole. And Bob looks at him and he goes, what the heck are you doing? What'd you jump in the hole for? And Steve just looks at him and smiles. He goes, you got to be crazy. Now we're both stuck in the hole. He says, what are you smiling about? And Steve just looks at him and smiles. He goes, because I've been here before and I know the way out. I got you, brother. So here's the deal. I've been in the hole and I know the way out. Love is eternal. Love never dies. Your loved ones know you're thinking about them. So think good thoughts and it'll come back to you. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, I love it. That's a good one there. And I've used a different version of that, but I've used that one a lot. I've put a lot of mileage on that one for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, as long as they're in a hole and they get back out, it's a good one. Because that's it. That's life, right? We look at things like that, and I think that's another thing that's good about the holidays. If you're on the holidays, take some extra time, go around and talk to the elders in the room. Tell you a story about one of their Christmases, one of their favorite Christmases, and why. You know, and I think we're going to start to see when we take that time and take away from our phones a little bit and take away from all the gadgets and gurus and whatnots out there, the bing bang zoomers, whatever you call it. I almost think of a Dr. Seuss when I'm saying that,
Yeah.
that get a quiet moment and talk to a couple of elders and get their story. And I think you'll find out that the Christmases isn't when they got, you know, uh, the biggest wish or anything like that. I think it's going to be those moments in time that wound up meaning so much, and you just don't realize it till it's gone, till it's past. Like the Ghost of Christmas Past, that's showing them this is when you were doing good. You used to laugh, you used to dance, at Fezziwig's Christmas party. You were in love once. And somewhere along the line, Scrooge, when you were trying to uh, provide. And Scrooge got so hung up on, I have to have a house and I have to have a job and I have to provide a salary and a home for you and everything else. Well, he was trying so hard to do that and got so caught up in the business end and the money, and he was chasing the wrong thing, that the very thing that started him on that quest he was losing because he wasn't paying any attention. And his love for money took over his love for Belle. And how many times can we look back? And that's a big rock to hold in your pocket. You know, that's a big rock to hold in your pocket. And that's what Steve and I mean when you've got all these rocks in your pocket. I also describe it like you're at the baggage claim at the airport. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like watching all this. It's just like I think about it. It's like this used to be a matching set of Samsonite with duct tape and stuff all over it. It's like stickers and bangs and dents. Your baggage is your baggage. If somebody else comes and puts their baggage in front of you, it doesn't mean you got to pick it up. you know I always look at mine and I'm like, look, I've got mine condensed down to one thing, one roll around behind me. It's still got duct tape and rope and a bungee cord on it and maybe a wheel's about to fall off, but it's mine. And I've got it down to just a little bit when it used to be so much. But like Steve said, you got to pick and choose which rocks you want to keep. And some of us have some heavy rocks we just can't let go. And you just got to look back and go, okay, what can I learn from that? Glean what you can, that's worth keeping, and lose the rest, because that's also what ghosts are telling us, because it holds them back and it holds them down. And most of the ghosts that we find out that are stuck, right, Steve? It's
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. It's either fear or people say unfinished business, but again, that becomes so cliche. It's more confusion, uh, anxiety, uh, regret, worry, and love also, and responsibility. So like a parent or a child, an older child that was looking over a younger child or something along those lines. I'm responsible for this. I have to stay. I have to look. Guards, soldiers and stuff, big with soldiers in battlefields. No, I have to continue my duty until I'm properly relieved. I've had to go on battlefields and tell other soldiers who just happen to be dead that I give them permission. They're properly relieved. I will take over their station for them, and then they go. So it could be something as simple as that. But the main things, the heaviest things that hold ghosts back, are those heavy rocks, those heavy tethers to the earthly realm. It's crazy how complicated and how simple it is at the same time, Steve. It's always been mind-boggling, which is why we'll never get all the answers to we're on the other side, and then we got to find somebody
Yeah.
and come through.
And then that's the thing with those big heavy rocks. all along. I mean, you may have carried that for years and years throughout your life into the afterlife, and then suddenly you realize, hey, I could just set this down here and
Mhm.
unburden myself. And there you
Unburdened,
go.
unburdened from what has been. Amen, brother. So that's the thing. And all this time we've been talking about rocks in your pocket. We're basically let me ask you this question. I'm gonna ask the listeners too. How many ghosts were in the Christmas Carol?
Now, I know the answer because you posed it to me before the show started, but I would have answered wrong. So I'm curious as to how people will answer that.
Yep, yep. And I tried it at work too, and we got 3 out of 4 incorrect. And I think that's so funny because it's one of those almost like those trick questions where people have been so.
You don't even think of the
Yeah.
one that should be the most obvious.
Yep, the most obvious, and in my humble opinion, I would say probably the most important, and that is the answer is 4, because everybody forgets about Jacob Marley at the very beginning, and
Yeah,
Marley was dead
the
to
one
begin
that
with.
kicks it off. Yeah,
Yeah, we've been dead 7 years, and it was very important to. Of course, we're talking about The Christmas Carol written by Charles Dickens. For those who are under one of those big rocks, instead of being in your pocket, you're. but, but the thing is Marley was always my favorite because even as a kid, I thought, man, it's here he's going through all this pain and suffering because of his deeds done on earth, and he still had the care and the wherewithal to come back and warn a friend who was merely a friend. I mean, the story basically comes out. Dickens also wanted it very clear that they would call each other. They were poor excuses for a friend for each other because it was mostly business. They were each other's only, his only mourner was Scrooge. And they weren't really social, they were more just business and done, and they had become very dark and dreary and repetitive. And Marley was just as Scrooge was, and
yeah,
came back to warn him. And what did he do? He said, these chains I have forged in life. So around him was all these money counting boxes and money boxes, these big heavy metal boxes filled with coin and chains, these huge heavy chains and deeds and everything that was, you know, weighing him down, tethering him to the earth, the earthly plane. And his sorrow and no love for his fellow man. It was all business, and they had no empathy and nothing. It's like I always think of I have so many Christmas carols dancing in my head right now, but even the Muppet Christmas carols, where they threw out the orphans and the frozen teddy bears in the snow. That it's just it's they were just all about them, and money. The love of money is the root of all evil. The love
yeah.
of it,
The love of
and
money. That's
yeah,
right.
and he took that love, of course, instead of Belle. And I don't know what Jacob's story was, but the man thought enough to come back and help Scrooge and give him a warning and said, your chains were the length of mine. Yeah, I think he said like 10 years ago. You're well on your way to more than this. And of course that scares the heck out of Scrooge. And that's why you will be visited by 3 spirits, ghost of Christmas past, present, future. And of course, the future one always scares everybody because he's pointing at Scrooge's headstone and says, "This is your fate if you don't change. If you don't change, and you'll die alone in a dark place." And of course, that flips Scrooge in one night, and that's very cool. I've seen people flip faster than that. Just get to that point and go, "Man, I don't like who I am. I'm changing." You know, but that's what ghosts come back to do sometimes. You and I have gone through thousands of stories of ghosts that came back to warn a friend, very much like Marley. And that's why I think he's the most important one in there. He gets the whole thing started with coming back with his face appearing over the knocker on the door and, wooing his way through the bed curtains. And, depending on what version you watched on a film or read what Dickens put pen to paper. Christmas Carol meant so much to him, and the way Dickens wrote, he was more of an early whistleblower. He was as much a journalist, I think, in a lot of ways as he was an author. But there was something about this book. He was very, with the Pickwick Papers and other books, he'd written many different ghost stories, Chimes, The Cricket at the Hearth, and so many other had sprinklings of ghost stories. And he wrote one, I forget the name, it might have been the Chimes. I forget now, but I know it was in the Pickwick Papers, where he spoke of a man who was similar to Scrooge, but I believe he used goblins or gnomes or something along those lines. But it had the same type of premise, like, if you don't change now, and this is how you got this way. They show him his past, and so this is what you were, and somewhere in there, where was that fork in the road for you, buddy? When did you fall in the hole and lose your way? Come to the crossroads, so to speak. And anyway, I just think it's fascinating how he put it all together, and he used to write, so many stories on how, the prisons were kept in the workhouses, because he was in one. He came up through, he got his armor the hard way too, and he didn't like the cruelty to people and the inhumanity and the way the poor were treated and everything. And he made a lot of change in his writings. And for sure, A Christmas Carol brought back the traditions of Christmas, and it sold out. He went almost bankrupt getting it printed because he wanted it beautiful. The illustrations and the gold gilding on the cover and everything, he wanted it to be, how did he put it? Like, to be given as a gift and
Yeah.
passed through the families, and it worked, and he never really made a lot on it. I forget how it all broke down. I know he broke even, and then, later on, I don't know how much he made on, but not much. But he brought back so many of the traditions of Christmas: the tree, the gift giving, the kindness to the poor, the charity, the cheer, the decorating. Even if you just brought in evergreens from outside and, a red bow, or something along the line. Such simplicity, but family and gathering and socializing with friends, and be of good cheer. All of that was brought back by A Christmas Carol. It was an amazing thing. And in there, he taught you how not to be a ghost.
Yeah.
And
Not,
everybody,
not to end up as a ghost. And in particular, I lost the thought that I was going to say there. But if you are going to be a ghost, how to be a better ghost, I guess would
how
be
to be
the
a
way
better
to say.
ghost. How to be a better ghost. And but it's just an amazing accomplishment, and it's something that I always, think about. I always put a copy of it on the table at Christmas, and um, I try to remember that. And I think that's another thing. It harkens back to what we were saying before about talk to your elders and find out what was important about Christmas to them. Even if it's not a family member, the point is to try to get them to go back, you know, almost a century, 50, 60 years, and see what was important then, and try to bring a piece of that to your family. I think we get so caught up. I see people now, my God, it's so, people rush around so much. They're not even, it's like a big wedding, like the bride and groom going to the wedding. And it's like, I always laugh because for people who don't know, I'm a floral designer and a wedding event designer. And I've done a lot of weddings. And I always tell the couple, listen, I know you're spending a lot of time cake testing and stuff like this and food testing. Honey, this is the only time you're going to taste this food. Because wedding day, you're going to be so busy. It's going to go by so fast. There's going to be so much handshaking and hugging and, and so much to do that you don't get a chance to appreciate it. So find a time to be quiet and settle somewhere. So I would always try to get them to go maybe eat a meal alone in a room, set up something like that if we could at the venue, because the time alone in quietness and just talking without a lot of background, you get so much, and and it's important. at Christmas, because that's the stuff that's going to sustain you later when you're going to need it, when you have, a more, maybe a holiday that's not going so well. You're going to have to live on those. And that's why I think some of those strong memories of loved ones are so uplifting and sad at the same time, because I think they're the most profound. And there certainly are with ghosts. It's amazing to me if you get a communication with a ghost, whichever way that may be, and the stuff that was important to us here on Earth, or however you want to say, among the living, it just isn't to them. What's important to them is our happiness, and that we live, and that we enjoy life, and that we try to be happy. And, like I said, the main message, that love is eternal and never dies. So there you go. And that's what Marley was coming back to tell his friend Scrooge.
Yeah, don't end up like me. He
Don't-
was using himself as a bad example.
Yep. Yep. And like I said, I've heard 1,000 stories since then, and you don't really hook it up to, just now thinking about, they're doing exactly what Marley was doing. I've known many people that have been, like I said, they thought they were being haunted by whatever, and it turned out to be this was such and such. Could be a complete stranger too. It doesn't have to be a friend or a family member that just connected with that energy and said, "Man, I see, I'm here." And here's one. You want to hear a quick ghost story? So
Yeah, let's hear it.
this guy, let's see, make sure there's nothing in here that give it away, because I don't have permission. I don't want to give them away, dox anybody. So, all right. So, young man and wife, they're in the 30, 35 realm. No kids, and they're in an apartment. So they're hearing all this bang and everything, and it takes a long time to figure out that it's not people upstairs, because that apartment wasn't rented, or that kind of thing. They went through the whole gauntlet, slow buildup of stuff. And the guy, by the time he got to my people that got me into this story here, he thought he was being attacked. And of course, because of all and again, this is why I do this, because of all the TV shows and movies and things that accentuate on those things, which again do happen, but not all the time. So he got himself all worked up and thought he was being attacked by, something really bad. And there was a lot of things happening. Like he'd go to reach for the remote and it would slide across the table out of his reach. He'd go to reach for a drink or, his beer or something like that, and it would slide across the table and move out of his reach. Or TV would change, bangs in the nights, lights off and on, cabinet door slamming. And he would say stuff like, it seems to always center around me. Like it'll be my car keys, it'll be my wallet, and then the wallet will show up in another room, or that kind of thing. And he says, making me late for work, making me late for all this other stuff. It can be really irritating. Now they hadn't really seen much. It was like shadows in the hallway, uncomfortable feeling being watched, that kind of thing. Until it got to the point where this guy was coming in the door, going out the door, can't remember which, and got like he couldn't open it. And then when he was like fighting with it, he got like shoved, like in the shoulder, pretty hard, but not punched, more shoved. So he felt like he needed to call and find out, because he thought he was, he had demons coming down his chimney or something. I don't know. So anyway, which again can happen, but not always. I always have
Indeed.
to say that, because I'm not ever saying that it doesn't exist. I'm just saying it's not all the time. So anyway, he got through, they go through the filters and everything and figure out what's going on. So get some good mediums on it. And okay, well, it's this guy. Do you know this guy's name is Gary? Do you know? I don't know any Gary. Okay. Well, wait a minute. Now you're dealing with this man who's scared to death and shaken, and of course it's a traumatizing thing. And his wife is doing pretty good, but she's explaining stuff that she sees him going through, and they're losing sleep, and the whole thing. It gets pretty nerve-wracking after a while for some people. And the ghost is having a hard time. He's coming in very sporadic to this medium. So we're not getting, Gary doesn't sit down next to the medium and just explain what he's doing and what he's here. You're getting it in pieces as you usually do. So it takes a little while to sort this. But the way it turns out after, I don't know, a couple of hours of trying to sort this and Gary giving up the ghost, so to speak, it turns out that Gary was a hardcore drug dealer and got into quite a few other things. Died in a motorcycle accident about a mile away. This guy, more than likely, we're putting together, was probably at a red light, really mad. Because he's really mad and he was having a fit, and which kind of often happened with this guy, he was turning into a real hothead. This guy connected into his energy and recognized what was going on. And the reason he attached to him and stayed with him is because this guy was also starting to get into drug dealing and doing some nefarious stuff. And he did not want him to go out like he did, because once he attached to him, because of the anger, he saw the love. And this guy, much like Dickens, even with Bell, had ruined that by following the love of money and drugs, and wound up ODing and getting into a motorcycle accident at the same time, I believe. He OD'd on the motorcycle, which caused the accident. And he recognized that energy in this man and wanted to help him, hinder him, keep him, make him late for drug deals, which of course he thought he was being harassed, shoved him to keep him from going, and did everything he could to get in his way. And also informed the medium that by doing these things and trying to do good, he was kind of halfway into that other side purgatory limbo kind of thing, that he would help himself raise up in vibration and he would go out on a better plane, if that makes sense. Incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, that is, and that does make perfect sense.
Tell me that's not a Jacob Marley thing.
Yeah, that is. That's a kind of a modern retelling of it.
Mm-hmm. These chains I forged in life. And I love that story because they're not related. They weren't really, they didn't know each other. This ghost connected with the living because of the energy, recognized the anger, but had enough wherewithal to recognize the love got through. That's how powerful love light is. That's how powerful light penetrates darkness. All you need is a pinprick of light to burst a whole room full of dark.
Yep.
And we proved it again and again and again and again. And look at what it did for Scrooge.
Mm-hmm.
In one night, he's dancing around, and I mean, he was giddy, And I think, and I've seen it, I've seen that weight come off of people, and it's just amazing, I've seen people battered down with it too. It's like, wow, you walk into a room full of energy vampires and tell me,
Yep.
like, you
When you
come out
realize you can put your rocks down and you're not dragging your feet, then you're dancing on air.
Absolutely. But you can't let other people put rocks in your pockets either, or
That's true.
chains
A lot of
around your
times
neck.
you're carrying other people's rocks. Nope, nope,
Yeah.
nope. I've got enough of my own. Here, you can have yours back, or I'll
Yeah,
just leave them
that's what
right
I
here.
mean by baggage claim, honey. Just because you put it down in front of me don't mean I won't pick it up. I mean, we talk about energy all the time, and there's times where my friends understand there's things I'm doing that if the phone rings and I don't answer it, it goes to voicemail. I'm not being rude. It's just I can't come out of the energy I'm in right now. And as soon as I answer that phone, I'm in yours.
Right.
And
That's
people don't get it.
absolutely.
There's something coming on. I got to bring this up. Now listen, Catholics, cover your ears. I'm not a theologian. I'm not. Listen to me. you come over to my house, you'll feel like you've had church, because if you want to testify, I got you all night long. I testify. But I'm not, what I'm telling you right now is I'm not bad. I love y'all. But there's something going on Christmas Eve with the Pope with his hammer in the wall. What's he breaking down on Christmas Eve? What's he opening up? Never been done before. And why would you have to knock down the wall to let these people out? What's going on, Steve?
Yeah, I heard just a little bit about that. You got me. I'm not a Catholic. I don't know that much about Catholicism, but it sounded very strange.
And well, the reason I bring it up is because I heard about it today, and I'm like, I don't pretend to understand it. It scares the living mess out of me. It reminds me, I don't know whether we're talking about CERN, we're opening portals. It says portals. It says portals. Opening portals, doing all this other stuff. Look, here's the thing. It's going to be televised live.
Might be worth watching.
I highly recommend. I'm not a doctor. I do not want to play one on TV, but I'm here to tell you, I have had to bring people back from some dark places, and be careful what you're watching on because don't watch any live exorcisms either. Because look, electronics, frequencies, they ride on that stuff. So oh man, I can't caution against it. If you understand it, fine. If you know what you're doing, don't write me letters. Don't email me. I'm just a caution, because people don't think about that. But there was a show on, I can't remember how long it lasted or whether it was real or fake or what. I don't even care. But they were doing live exorcisms on TV.
Yeah, no, thank you.
I said, man, you got to be out of your mind, because that demon coming out of there, it's going somewhere, and it's gonna jump in it's like they're like water. They're gonna easiest access. Boom, 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 boom. And trust me on that. If there's anything, look, I don't tell people. I'm not an expert, and I do not ask Steve. I don't very rarely say I know. I'll say I think, I believe. I know this. I know this. I was listening. I used to call into a radio show. It's like 20 years ago. And it was a guy and his wife. I just loved their little attitude. He knew absolutely nothing about ghosts. He just loved ghost stories. And he would go on there and he'd say, and he would have a call-in show, which was great. It was fun. People call in with their ghost stories. People get to know each other, and there'd be one lady in a haunted house call in once a week. Well, what's happening this week, Mary? Well, all the dishes flew out of the cabinet. It was amazing. The dog was flying around the living room, whatever it may be. And this guy would say, well, I've never heard of that before. Dog flying around your living room. It's like, can you get it on video? I mean, just whatever. It was a goofy show. So he would call out and say, hey, have you ever heard of something like this? Please call in and let us know. So, I can't help it. So I've got paranormal Tourette's. I can't help myself. So I call in and I tell, and we got a rapport, right? So I would be like phone a friend. If they had a ghost question, they'd call Cisco. And so anyway, this one guy got to be like, one of those like 3 or 4 times. It was almost like an Art Bell moment where Mel's Hole would call in and say, oh my God, Mel, Yeah. So this guy named Kevin, that was his name. That was the name he gave anyway. Anyway, this guy, Kevin, he was having a hard time. And, they'd joke back and forth and go, he's probably pulling our leg. Nobody would be going through that kind of hell. And I'm like, maybe so. Because I was picking up everything truthful on the energy I was reading, and a couple of times I was able to kind of see some of, you know what I mean? And so anyway, I knew this guy, Kevin, was in some real trouble. So I had to call in, off the air. I had to call in and go, look, man, you got to treat this one with kid gloves. He's really in some stuff over there, Then I had to explain that, and his wife was a full-on believer and taking all kinds of, trying to understand it. And he was just learning, which is understandable. So I'm telling him, you got to be careful with this stuff on air, because the stuff in his house can jump. So what do you mean jump? And I'm like, through the air, jump. What do you think I mean by jump? Just jump into you, So I said that you just be careful. Maybe put it on a delay or something. The very next week, Kevin calls in. He hadn't called in for like 2-3 weeks. Nobody heard from him. Thinking about doing wellness check, but you don't know who these people are. You just wonder, where'd they go? And then he called in, and I'm listening to this live show, and I'm going, uh-oh. Right away, I started to feel it. And this guy is talking about, I can't remember exactly what it was. Was this the night he called in? I think he was on the couch, and it tried to pull him through the couch from the bottom.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like you're asleep on the couch. And then all of a sudden he's laying there, just a hardworking construction dude out in Tennessee somewhere, I think it was. No, Kentucky. Kentucky, it was Kentucky. And he was asleep on the couch, pregnant wife and 3-year-old in the bedroom asleep. And he's woken up by what he feels like are arms and hands, large hands, that have come up through the bottom of the couch around his midway, mid torso, around his stomach, and clenched onto him and tried to pull him down through the couch. And this is what woke him up. And he said that for a brief moment, he actually saw these, hands and arms and all this other stuff, and they weren't human, and they were more reptilian-like or greenish, scaly, whatever kind of thing. Just hideous. And I can't remember how he got out of it. I can't remember what he did, but it broke loose. And anyway, he was a mess. There was something else going on, some kind of construction he was talking about, that he was trying to move out of the house, but he hadn't gotten the other house finished yet or fixed, or some kind of mess. And he's back and forth talking about that. And all of a sudden, I'm like, I feel it. It's coming. It's getting bad. Oh, no. I mean, you could just feel it coming. And I'm like, And sure enough, you just hear this guttural growl, like this rumble, and it's just getting louder and louder and louder. And it's the kind that starts to rumble you from inside of you and resonates outward. And I'm like, you're just froze. And it just, this growling, screeching nastiness comes over the radio. I was almost doubled over, and I was ready for it. And I just backed up. I went with the momentum. It like hit me, and like somebody was going to punch you in the stomach, but you went with it. That's what it felt like to me. So I took a step back, and I turned, and I just grabbed all my stuff off the desk and just rebuked it like like nobody's business, man. I was just 360, and I was like, phew. And I mean, I had sweat on my forehead. That's how bad it was. I didn't even hear. When it happened, I reached out at the same time and like flicked it off. So when I finished that, I turned it quick back on to see what was going on their end, because this is live. And they're talking about it. And she's saying, that's just awful. Just, oh my gosh, I don't feel good. The calls he had that came in of people that got physically ill through all of the stuff across the airwaves was incredible. I think he said he had 360 emails just of people that actually physically got sick. And I don't know Steve, how many were so sick they couldn't call. You see what I mean?
That's true. Yeah.
So that's one that happened, right in front of me. And I mean, we were on that for a long time, because they were calling me all the time after that. Well, what should I do? What should I do? It's look, man, I told you, it's a responsibility, and it really is. And that's why I think it's a responsibility too, when people come on and say definitive things about, certain stuff, like I'll say something like, I personally would not go into an abandoned insane asylum or a jail, because of the amount of energy it's going to take me to fight off every anxiety, confused. It's almost like all those energies come together in a large ball, a large mass of negative, and it's human, but they were so confused and messed with in life, that you would be hard pressed to sit down with 10 of those patients throughout the decades. Say you just handpick 10 and put them in a room, and it's you by yourself, and you go, okay, now everybody talk at once, and I'm going to sort everything you're saying. We're going to fix all your problems. That's what you're doing when you're walking in, except they're dead. So when I say that, I don't mean paranormal investigators shouldn't go in and say, I'm not saying that at all. That's but please understand when you go into those places, you just very well may be bringing something home.
Know what you're going into and what you can bring out with you.
Right. And you can, you know it, you can not know it. It's like the movie Fallen, where the demon is kind of like just meandering around and just easy breezy. Time is on my side. Time, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that's it. They can go dormant. They can latch on to, and because they're confused. They were confused in life, depending on what would happen to them. Can you imagine what a person is like after 50 years of being locked down in Alcatraz?
Yeah.
Just saying.
Right now.
And then you go in there and, put a mask on and go sit down in there and close that jail cell and just sit there and go, is anybody here? And I'm like, yeah, honey, there's somebody here. They may or may not want to talk to you, but, I guess it's because we're physical and we're used to everything so physical. Like if you hear it said all the time, Steve, if I don't hold it in my hand, I don't believe it, or I don't, show it to me unless I see it, I don't believe it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So because you can't see what's around you, it's very hard to convince people, the danger you could be in. Like, look, here's a guy that goes onto the battlefield in Gettysburg. This actually happened. And he starts whistling Dixie on the Yankee side. He's being impertinent. He's asking all these, just being a jerk. What's what's it feel like to be shot? How many people did you kill? Or how did you die? Or just coming in, kicking the door in, And he did that. He got punched in the stomach and doubled over. Lady got slapped in the face for doing the same thing by a ghost. And in some cases, people would say, oh man, that was great. Did you get that on camera? I understand that. But here's the thing. These are people. Ghosts were people too. And if that was my son or me or your husband or your wife or your daughter, and they were stuck and confused, what are you going to do when you walk by the hole? Are you just going to throw rope down in there and, and say, hey, look, give me $50 and knock 3 times on the side of the hole, and I'll pull you up? Or are you going to jump down in there with them and say, look, man, I'm sorry, you're past, and, what's going on? What do you see? What's going on? How can I help you? And try to show them a little bit of that light, because if you can show them the light, they got the rest. They've forgotten what it looks like, because all they've seen is darkness and their own confusion. Now some of them are a little bit more intelligent and they've got it, like what Steve and I call most of the time jumpers. They hang out at the bars and casinos. You've got a few that hung around the casinos you worked in Las Vegas, didn't you, Steve?
Yeah, absolutely did.
Yeah.
Bally's says site of the MGM fire, and the retrofitted Bally's in there. And yeah, there was all kinds of things happened in the casino, and then in the back part in the offices and stuff too. It was a scary. I made a video about it, and I wrote about it in one of my books.
Man, that's I think well, people for people who don't know what jumpers are. Jumpers are ghosts that they have a little bit more of an awareness about their present state. So it's, again, there's so many different types of ghosts. You can get the ones like we just talked about in the asylum that might be, look, they were confused in life, they're going to be confused in death, and it's literally therapy and the perfect situation would be a couple of mediums to go in there with a psychotherapist and you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
just love them through it. Just love them, try to get it to the point where, and then more than likely you have to get somebody on the other side to come and walk them over. You know what I mean? That kind of thing, an assist. But with some of these like jumpers, they've kind of they've made their choices and they're happy with it because they've decided to stay and hang out at a bar or a casino or something similar because they like the atmosphere, they like the energy when it gets full with people. The ones when I worked at the bar, there were several, but this one, I was worked at this place about 2 years, so I got to see him a couple times. There was a him. And I don't know his story. He didn't talk much, and I certainly didn't have my abilities honed like they're not now even. But this was years ago, and I've learned some things since then. So this guy he knew he was dead, best I could get, and he knew darn well what he was doing. And what he liked to do was he hung out in the back end of the kitchen somewhere. When the bar got filled, he would show up as this mist, and sometimes it'd be very dark, sometimes it'd be gray. And he would kind of hover around the clientele behind their back. And you'd watch him like kind of almost go through the crowd. One time, well, actually twice, saw him go down behind the backs of the people sitting at the bar. And all of a sudden, he'd go in one. And I found out later exactly what I explained before about how it'll tap on different people, like the demon in Fallen, and the ones with cracks in the windshield or cracks in their protective aura, which is, you're depressed, you're in an angry state, you're sick, infirmed in any way, any kind of drugs, alcohol, anything that will bring you down lets them in, any of those lower vibrational things. And he just find an easy jump. He'd jump in and he'd be in that body for just a few minutes, and then he'd leave. And that person would have no memory whatsoever of what they did. Usually playing pool, playing the jukebox, getting a shot of tequila, no salt, raise a little ruckus, maybe slapping a few butts, pinching a few girls, getting a few
Yeah.
guys slapped. And then you got the ones that are over in Bobby Mackey's. There's like three real what do they used to call them? The banditos, like the up San Juan Hill kind of Mexican. What were they called? Banditos, weren't they?
Yeah. Yeah.
With the almost one of them, the medium described to me, he actually had you remember the bandoliers they used to have across their chest with the bullets in them, and like the
Yep.
cartoons and stuff like that. He actually had one of those. She said he was a character and a half, but there was like four of that era, okay, and another two of the like a little bit more recent, in the 18th century. And they all got together and they're all jumpers. And what they like to do is jump into weak people in the bar and cause bar fights and drink beer. And then jump out of them and leave these poor people with blackouts. And they'd have no idea what caused the fight or why they're sitting in the darn jail for causing a ruckus or whatever. And they thought it was the funniest thing that ever, and they had no intentions of going anywhere. They were having a blast. So there are different types of ghosts, folks. Not all of them are helpful.
Yeah. Not all of them are Casper the Friendly Ghost.
That's true. Or Jacob Marley,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, it's amazing to me. It's a wondrous subject, but that's it. When you asked me to describe my show, I wanted to make sure that before I left this earthly plane, that I put out there that, gosh, absolutely learn all about the dark side and what can happen and have respect for it, as far as what to do, what not to do, and not to mess around. It's not a game. And, but don't miss the miracles, because the miracles are the best. They're just the little spontaneous things, and we can miss them. Whether you're just looking for angel numbers. I'll tell you, this past week that went by, it was funny because I saw the 1111, and I went, I always say it when I see it, 1111, And it's kind of people like us, we just do that kind of mess. And then I said, man, it would be cool if I've never had a 12-hour, like 11:11, and then in the morning, like if you saw it at night, you see it in the morning again. That's like, wow, it's a double, And I had said that to my son. And the next morning, sure enough, wasn't even trying, forgot all about it. 11:11. And I said, man, that's a trip, And I said, thank you, angels. Thank you, spirit guides. I see you, and you acknowledge it. If you acknowledge it, they know you're paying attention. They can do it more. I mean, it's like they keep doing stuff and you don't acknowledge it. It kind of dwindles away. They figure, well, she ain't paying no attention. But if you acknowledge it, that you're engaging in that good energy, and they do it more. So I said, oh man, that's great. I got a double. That's so cool. And sure enough, I forgot all about it. And that night, I got a triple. So from
Wow.
12 hours, yeah. And I was like, oh my God, I got a triple. It's just like, that's never happened to me before. And again, I wasn't trying. It was on different clocks, It's just so weird. But it's just the little things, It just, the amazing things that happen, the bird that you see. Here's one. A friend of mine calls up. She's one of these, bless her heart, but she always has to be validated multiple times just to believe it a little bit. And there are people like that, and that's fine. If that's your journey, walk it, baby. So she called me up. She's like, oh, I just wish, she goes, I was talking to my sister and I think something happened, but I'm not sure. And I wanted her to buy you. I'm like, shoot. And she says, we were talking about my dad, and she was very sad. And again, it was the holidays, and she was, they were basically very sad together on the phone. They had this long conversation. And I said, okay. I said, well, did you do what I told you to do about, always leave it on a happy note? She goes, no, I couldn't. No, it's like, okay. Said, if I could just know that he's okay, no matter how many times she goes and sees mediums and he comes through, whatever, she's just not a denier. I don't know what you call it, Steve. It's more like constant validation. It's never going to be enough. There's people like that. They just question it, and that's fine. That's their journey. They got to work it out. So anyway, she's telling me this, and she says, no, I didn't leave it on a happy note. We're just sad as the time. She goes, but then I was going to work, and she said, I left I walked out my front door, and she goes, I go to my car, and there's this beautiful red cardinal sitting right on my driver's side mirror. And she said, I just froze in my step. And I said, what did you feel? She goes, what do you mean? I said, what did you feel when you stopped and you saw the bird, the cardinal? What did you feel? She said, I felt surprised. I felt startled. She said, then I felt really warm, and I felt just a smile. And then I thought, maybe that's my dad sent this bird to say he was okay. And I said, and then what happened? She said, well, I was afraid to move because I didn't want to scare it. And it stayed there for quite a while and just kind of looked at me. And then it flew off, and then it sat on a branch, and it kind of stayed there for a minute. And I just kind of looked at it, and, we spent a good few minutes. And she said, that's never really happened. They usually just fly away on me. I said, okay, but how'd you feel? She said, I felt pretty good. She said, I felt warm and wondering if that was my dad or he had sent it. I said, okay, then what happened? She goes, it flew away. And I got in the car and I got to work, and I said, well, how'd you feel? She said, by then I was convinced that I was being crazy. I said, you talked yourself out of feeling good, didn't you? She said, yeah. I said,
Yep. You can talk
yep.
yourself into and out of things that
Well,
are
that's it.
otherwise would be beneficial.
Right. And the whole point of the story is, how did you feel in the moment it happened? I felt warm and I felt a smile. She actually said that, because this is not the first time we've had that conversation with that particular person about something like this. And she always talks herself out of it. So she'll see angel numbers and she goes, oh, I was just looking. I really want, and she's just one of those people. Don't do that. Accept it, and it'll happen more. One of the saddest things I see is people that sit down and go, why doesn't such and such come to me? Does that mean he doesn't love me? No, 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 no. Don't buy any of that earthly bunk. It has nothing to do with that. What it has to do with is your journey. your journey, you. So they know what they have to do and how they can't get involved with making decisions for you. What we want is we want instantaneous everything. We want to look up and go, hey, how come so and so that's passed doesn't help me pass this test I got to take? No, honey, that's not how it works. If you want strength to get through it, you ask them to stand with you, your spirit guides and stuff like that. Yeah, but you on your own. You got to earn that. They're not supposed to get involved. They're not supposed to get involved and make decisions for you. They're supposed to be there and say, love continues on, and we're seeing you. We see that wedding. We see that. We see it all. And if they're not coming to connect with you, it's possible you're the one that's blocking it, or you're not ready for that information yet, and your consciousness has to evolve a little bit. You have to go through some things. You have to go through a little bit
That
and get
one
a little
gets
more of
my
that
vote
armor.
and a lot of stuff. You've got to be ready for it.
Yep. And you get a little bit more of that armor, because if they told you at this point, you wouldn't understand. I mean, here's the thing. Okay, I'm going the night before I went in the Army, and my mom, like I said, she had passed when I was 10, and I would see her periodically. And Steve and I have talked about that multiple times and what we've learned from it. And it's amazing. She's been my best teacher in life and in death. So here's the night. Now, I hadn't seen her for, I would say, 5-6 years. I mean, in ghost form. Okay, no contact, no nothing. And as far as apparitions go, let's just put it that way, seeing her. So this night I'm going to North to the bus, catching the bus to go to basic training in the morning, right? I'm staying at my sister's. I'm on her couch. No arms came through the couch to pull me through. I was fine. So all of a sudden, she's got this back door she's very nautical and close. Her house is like a museum. So anyway, she's got this back door, and the top part of the door is glass. And she's got this fishing net with all these Japanese hand-blown glass balls and shells and stuff in this fishing net. It looks kind of cool. But when you open the door, it makes a distinctive sound when you're opening it to come in, to go out. It's just a different sound. So it's late at night, and I hear it. And I've got 3 nieces that live there, and they're all teenagers, and they all have a curfew. And it's way past curfew. So I hear the door open, and I'm thinking, oh, man, somebody's going to get it, because they're coming in late. And I called out something like, you better get that door shut and get in there before you wake up your mom. You're going to catch it. Something like that. And I lift up to look at the door to see one of my nieces trying to drag their butt in after curfew, and nobody's there. And the door isn't open. But I heard it. I know I heard it. And as I'm looking at the door, trying to go, what? Wait a minute. And I'm looking around to see if somebody, they're starting to go up the stairs, and I didn't catch it. But nobody. And all of a sudden I start to see this mist and a little sparkle in the middle. And it's growing, and it's coming through the door. And it's coming like right in front of me, maybe 10 feet away. And it starts to form, and all the sparkles start to get wider, and it starts to get color, and it starts to take a form of a person. And before I know it, there's my mom standing right in front of me. And she looks great. Now, before, when she was coming to me, she was still coming in her earthly connected form. She was still sick. She was obviously infirm. She had passed with cancer. And now she's standing in front of me. Looks like she's ready to go to the office. She's going, she looks great. Hair's done, makeup on, big old smile. She looks fantastic. She's wearing a suit. I'm like, my goodness, Mom. And I'll promise you, Steve, I smelled her and felt her before she ever formed. And that's something you have to look out for too. I mean, if you have any abilities or intuition, everybody's got the intuition. You can feel them. You can feel that warmth, which is why I was asking her, how did you feel when you saw the cardinal? Of course, that was your dad sent that bird to tell you he was okay. Of course he did, or your angel or your spirit guide to give you, yes, he's fine, honey. He's here with us. All those are good messages. Accept it and happy on with it. Don't talk yourself out of it. So here I am. I feel my mom, And there's this sparkle. There she is. She looks great. No earthly burdens. So now I can look back at there and go, she'd crossed over. She'd empty all her pockets, at least most of them. And she had let those earthly burdens go. And now she was whole again. And she felt good and she looked good. And her energy was just vibrant. And she just smiled. She spoke to me telepathically. And she said very little, but it was very profound. And she's like, I see you. You're doing good. I'm proud of you. And I love you. And I'm asking, it's like, oh my God, Mom, are you okay? And I'm asking all these, like machine gunning questions, nonsensical questions like, oh my gosh, is that you? Stuff like that. And she's just smiling and she keeps talking. But again, never moved her mouth, just telepathically. And then I remember saying to her, I felt like she was going to go. And I said, wait, am I doing the right thing? Because in the morning, I'm going in the Army. And she picked up her hand and she went like, with her finger, like, no, no, no. And she says, I can't tell you that. You have to make your choices. But I'll be here. I'll be watching. And I love you. And I'll see you again. Sparkle, sparkle out. Mist go out. And doggone it, if I didn't hear that doggone door open and close again.
Sure.
Never moved, but I heard it. And that's just amazing to me that she would add that extra audio. You know what I mean? This is incredible to me.
Yeah.
And I remember telling my sister that because I hadn't talked, nobody in my family talks about, it's crazy. Nobody talks about ghosts. They're all, And when I told her that years and years later, her first reaction, I think I put this in the book, she said, I wonder why she thought she felt like she had to use the back door. I just laughed my ass. They fought a lot in real life, but it's just funny. Like she probably did feel like she needed to use the back door and it shouldn't have come in the front. That was a profound statement now that I think about it, but that's pretty cool. But there it is. It's just the whole point of bringing that whole thing up was to tell you a little ghost story that actually happened to me from probably my best teacher ever. And the fact that, again, she just validates that whole thing that I understand. They keep coming back and go, no, they can't give you those answers. They're not supposed to. They're not allowed to, however you want to put it, because we have to make our choices. We are responsible for our choices. And if somebody gave us the playbook and we just cheated our way through life, what would we gain? We wouldn't have earned any of it. So when you're going through these hard times, when you work through those difficult times and you come out on the other end with a giggle or a laugh or a smile, well, you just got rid of another big rock somehow, or one that was beginning to form, because they love you. They're not connecting with you because of, there's 1,000 reasons why they wouldn't, but none of them are because they don't love you enough. That's never the answer. The answer is usually you're not ready to hear it. They're busy over there doing whatever they got to do. I know that sounds insane, but I say that with confidence. And it's just an amazing thing. And we miss all that, especially at Christmas, when I grab up an ornament, instead of going, oh my gosh, this, I go, man, I remember the time, putting this up with my mom, or I do it to honor them and to remember them. And I think we all do that in little ways when we do those traditions, or hang the stocking, or do the tree the way, they did, or make that green bean casserole that Granny used to make, or apple pie, or whatever. And I think that's so important in this, because they are there. They continue on. It's like that sappy song from Titanic, my heart will go on, as long, you ever hear the statement, Steve, as long as it's in almost every culture now that I think about it, as long as you were spoken of, you never die, as long as people remember, and speak your name. And I think it goes on even more than that. I think our energy always resonates throughout, and I think that's why there's places where a lot of bad energy is collected, and a lot of good energy is collected, and then all the in-betweens that we wade through every day, and empaths like us, man, that's that can be rough, especially
Yeah,
around these
that's
times.
really saying something. Yeah.
Especially around these times, I think maybe in some ways that's why we craved, why the malls were so cool at the holidays, because you just go around there and the lights and everybody rushing with their packages, and whether you were there to buy something or not, you got a lot of that energy. For me, it was always a lot of anxiety, and you'd pick up off of that, but the bass notes were all wonderment from the kids, and you
Yeah.
know the decorations, and there's something to be said for that. You definitely feel
And
different.
plus, for me, it was the anonymity of being in a big crowd like that of, busy people, happy people. Everybody wasn't happy. It's, the holidays, but
Sure.
I did like that being singular in a big crowd like that.
Right, because I think at that time, even though that you definitely had the mix in with the anxiety of the people working there, you know who knows what they're going through, and especially in the holidays, I've been on both ends of that. And then you've got the people that want to get the things and can't afford it, can't figure out how, that kind of thing. But you also have a lot of the hope and wonderment. You have the people that are there to enjoy
For
the
the little
atmosphere.
kids to get their
Right.
picture made with Santa and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
That beauty of all that. And but again, just a titch, just one drop of that, you know, you're gonna feel that more than that heavy weight of those other lower vibrations, that it's almost like a helium balloon that lifts everything up, so the lights and the atmosphere and everything changes. Look, that's true, or grocery stores and casinos and places like that wouldn't be so daggum bright, pumping in oxygen with all the lights and everything else. It's just how you feel. They want you wide awake and spending money, you know and if
Yeah.
that didn't work, they wouldn't be spending so much time researching the things that work like that. Well, it's like that in life. I mean, if you're listen, you've got two groups of people. You walked in a bar. If you knew everybody in the bar, but it was split in two, and you had a table on the right laughing and joking and having a good time, and then you had a table on the left that was just sad and crying, and people got their head down, it's all gray. What table you want to sit at?
Yeah.
Okay.
Seriously.
Right. So what are you drawing? And it's the same way with ghosts. It's like, believe me, folks, they're everywhere. You know, people laugh. Some of the things that people say is like, well, why don't we see this? Why don't we see that? Well, why don't you see it? It's like, we'll ghost hunt, turn around.
Yeah.
I'm
Open
going
your
ghost
eyes. Look
hunting. Turn
behind you.
around. But I'm just, that one just might not want to communicate with you or even be aware you're there, or, whatever. But they're everywhere. I heard two people talking the other day. It's one of the largest podcasts in the world. Let's just say that. Anyway, it's two fellas sitting there talking. And this one guy, boy, he was a trip. But he was trying to explain about ghost hunting and stuff he had seen, and he was an ex-soldier and all this other stuff too. So he'd seen some stuff, really horrible combat stuff, and then it's funny how many police and military are in ghost hunting. It's quite a percentage, but and I think it's just the the brave, being brave, and you be also going against the unknown, and that kind of stuff too. It's just takes a certain kind, I guess. But anyway, um, he's talking about stuff he's gone through, and the other guy, the host, is saying, I was going around, and there's this one house, and it was a famous murder of a young child, and it was in Colorado. Let's just put it that way. And he and his wife were looking for a house. I think they said, they were going through the Zillow, the Realtor, whatever it was. They go, man, look at this house. Why is it? Man, that's a nice house. Why is it so cheap? So basically, the story was that it had been this house that this child was killed. And the host was saying, man, I can't imagine getting, that house should have just been torn down to the ground. And then what are you going to do with the land? Somebody, this little kid died on it. Who wants to be there? And I agree with everything you said. However, I couldn't stop laughing, because I'm thinking, For somebody that, but if you don't know, you don't know. So it doesn't matter how much you know about the world. You cannot, not everybody knows everything. So I'm thinking, are you kidding me? Everywhere you step, somebody's died. You've had massacres and people have lived on this land for eons, and there's homes that horrible, horrible things have happened in. I couldn't understand why these two gentlemen were thinking that, I guess, every house that has had some bad thing happen to it, or every piece of land that's had some bit that there's nothing standing on it because nobody could live on it. If that was the answer, then so be it. You and I have talked about many a times where people say, I don't understand why my house is haunted, it's brand
Yeah,
new. Well,
doesn't matter.
it doesn't
The
matter.
land is not brand new.
Right. And it's not just the land. Ghosts aren't stuck. Not all ghosts are stuck where they died, so it doesn't have to have a massacre there. It could be, you know, car accident down the street, 20 miles. It just, there's no rules like that, you know. The rules shift all the time. It's constantly moving, isn't it, Steve? They change all the time.
Oh yeah.
It seems like it. It seems like it, but there's just not that tight box when it comes to ghosts. It just isn't, you know, because that's why I was warning about, to watch things live on TV and stuff like that. Okay. If I was talking to a large group of people in a room, I'm going to definitely have one or two people that say, I've played with Ouija boards 100 times and nothing's ever happened to me. Oh, okay, honey. I'm glad. Anything happened to your neighbor? How about your grandmother? How about the guy that, at the office that just never showed up anymore because whatever attached to you, he was an easier hit and he jumped off of you and hit him? You just don't know. There's no measuring tool for this where you can say definitively that nothing has happened. Maybe nothing's happened yet. Because I've had people that have gone by and gone through extenuating, uh, just trying to get stuff off of them, and have multiple talented people working on the case, and it just took so much. You have no idea. And it comes down to 10 years ago, this is what happened. This is what you did. This is where you were when you opened whatever that was. And this got in and it waited, you know. And you just there's no stick to measure that. The amount that what the things that I've seen, to look back. Should I tell that time I was called in on that case for the whatchamacallit curse, the
Yeah.
bloodline curse, Steve? I don't know how much time we have. I'm not looking at the clock.
We've got about I can't count in my head. About 22 minutes left.
All right. Well, let me tell you. Let me do this then. You remind me the next time I come on. Make a note, and I will tell you about the time that a descendant of Madame Laveau, who was deeply, deeply, deeply into hoodoo and voodoo, needed my help as with my Lenape and Native American, what I do, and along with a bunch of others to get a bloodline curse off of a woman that had been on her going back 150 years on her family. I'll tell you that story. But tonight, I'm going to tell you about the Christmas hug for Christmas. Is that cool?
Yeah, please do.
All right. So, just to give you a touch of a background, my adult son was in a horrible, horrible car accident. Absolutely debilitating. 38 days in ICU, another 3 months in the hospital, and physical therapy for years. He had a severe brain injury, but he was doing fantastic. He is a miracle. So just knock on wood, he's doing great. But at the moment when this happened, it was the first Christmas after his accident. And because anything flashing or lights or things like that could cause a seizure, it was extremely uncomfortable for him, cause headaches. We had to ease into things, for entertainment wise. So he couldn't go back immediately to things like watching movies or television shows or things like that. There's too much flashing going on, too much movement, too much. So I said, let's start simple and watch some old stuff. Like we watched Twilight Zone series and things like that. It was very cool. We were easing back into it, like getting into the water. Okay. So this Christmas, and the things they had been through, and we had angel sightings, all kinds of stuff. It was absolutely amazing watching this young man get back up and on his feet again. And we're sitting on the couch, and I was doing some kind of a thing, and he was helping me with, I think it was like wrapping small presents we were giving out or whatever. And we were watching, I said, we're watching old black and white movies. So I pulled out all my old favorites, and we were watching Harvey, which is a great, if you've never seen it, I highly recommend it, with Jimmy Stewart. And in between, I think it was TCM, they play these little clips. And it'll be like little clips from Christmas movies or whatever moments, moments to remember from classic movies. And in this clip, it just happened to be Mario Lanza and the great Caruso singing Ave Maria. And he and I talk about my mom a lot. Even though I lost her when I was 10, I always told my sons about her. So keep her going. And he knows quite a bit about my mom, his grandmother. And I guarantee you, she's the one that with a whole army of his his guardian angels held him together until that helicopter got there on that dark Alabama road that night, I guarantee you. And I've been told as much. So we're sitting on a couch, and I said, oh, man, listen to this. I said, this is Grandma Peggy's all-time favorite Christmas song, sung by her favorite singer, Mario Lanza. I said, let's listen to it. And we listened to the song. It's an absolutely beautiful song, absolutely beautiful version of it. And while he was singing it, I was telling him the words and what they meant. And it was just a beautiful moment. And at the end of it, he said, I hope you saw that. We just smiled, because that's how we are around here. And then the next movie came on, and the moment was gone. And it was just a nice evening. So fast forward, I guess about a week or two, and I had set up with a gallery that carries a lot of my jewelry. She wanted me to connect into a couple of mediums because she wanted to have an old-fashioned Victorian seance right before Christmas, and then tell ghost stories like they did in Old England back in the day, telling ghost stories on Christmas Eve. So she was doing this whole big Victorian thing. And I had a couple of friends that were perfect for this certain situation, and they could pull something like that off, very theatrical and wonderful, and very good mediums, by the way. So the one that I had that was doing the seance, not anybody could just jump in and do this, got the flu. And she called me in a panic, the one with the flu. And I said, honey, I got it. I got some backup. You go get better. We love you. Called the gallery, says, look, I'm going to send the word out. I've got a couple of people. Not anybody can just do this, but I'll get you somebody. I'm going to send the word out. She said, okay. So I did that. And I got 3 people to call. And I said, cool. So I pick up the phone, call this one lady. Never spoke to her before. Don't know her from Adam. She knew one person I knew that I trusted, which is why I got the number. But she knew nothing about me. And the person that she got the number from didn't know that much. Not personal stuff, anyway. So I'm standing in my kitchen. And I'm saying, well, she says, well, I hear you're looking. I said, yep. And she goes, I said, this is what we need. She just needs a little bit of this, and then you just do your regular thing or whatever. And you can do readings, you can collect whatever you want to check, but this part is going to be free. You're getting paid to do this part. And it's going to be at 10 people, blah, blah, blah. We're going through the details of the night. And she said she had the Victorian getup and the whole shebang, and it was fantastic. So as we're talking, she goes, hang on, you were talking about dates and times and everything. She said, hang on just a minute. She said, I really can't concentrate. I apologize. I can't concentrate. She goes, but there's a woman here that really wants to talk to you. And she's not going to let me get another word in edgewise unless I tell you that she's here. And I just smiled really big, and I leaned against the counter. And I said, tell her to come home. And I'd kind of gotten used to this. And it's I don't want to say it that way, but it's happened before. Let's just, my mother's a trip. So anyway, I said, okay. And I have no idea who this is, but I got a feeling because I can feel her. It gets very familiar. You kind of recognize it. So the lady says, okay. And I said, oh, well, just tell me what you need to tell me. Tell me how you need to do it. I'll just stay quiet. She said, okay. She goes, I've got a lady here. I'm getting yeah, she says it's older, maternal, either a mom or an aunt, an older sister. And I'm like, okay, keep going, because I got them all over there, even though I know who it is. I'm not saying. And she says, nope, 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 maternal. No, 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 this is your mom. And I'm like, I'm smiling. I'm like, yeah. And she says, was she very religious? She just said it just like that. And I went, well, well, really more spiritual, but definitely a believer, lots of faith, but not really a strict religion, if that's what you mean. Why? And she said, but definitely she could quote you the Bible. And she said, I said, why are you asking that? She goes, I don't know. She said, I'm trying to figure this out. Hold on a minute. She goes, yeah, is it religious? Or she says, no, 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 wait a minute. And I said, well, what is she saying to you? She's not saying anything. She's singing. And I said, well, what is she singing? She said, Ave Maria.
Wow.
I just busted out laughing. I go, yeah, that's her. And she says, okay. She says, you got it. You got it. She's smiling now. I said, what does she need to say to me? She said, I was there on the couch. Tell him I saw him and I love you. And I just said, we love you too, Mama.
Amazing.
Merry Christmas. And then I felt this strong warmth and this strong rush right through my center, right over my heart and right out my back and right up my neck. And my hair practically stood up. And I just felt like I had been dropped in a cup of hot chocolate whipped cream. It was amazing. It
Good
was
description.
fast, but it was amazing. And the lady on the other end, I almost dropped the phone, Steve. The lady on the other said, ooh, she's happy now. She said, she just gave you a hug. And I said, you tell her I felt it. Merry Christmas, everybody. Love is eternal.
Yeah, that was a good one. Now, not to take away from yours, but I got one that I want to share here real quick
Please do.
in the closing. And you've heard it before, so you know which one I'm going to pull out of the hat
I
here.
love it, though. I love it. It's magical.
This is in my book, My Strange World, I believe. It's chapter 16. Now, when I was a kid, a house where I grew up in East Tennessee, we had 2 living rooms. What we actually used as living room had at one time been intended to be a dining room, but we instead ate at a small table in a nook off the kitchen. The room on the front of the house, actually intended to be a living room, was referred to by my parents, my mother in particular, as the good living room. And what this meant was that I was allowed to play, watch TV, whatever in the living room, but the good living room was off limits, forbidden, verboten, no entry. This was reserved for entertaining, or in the Southern vernacular, when we had company coming over. Now, the only time when visitors weren't being entertained that it was permissible to be in the good living room was when I was doing homework and around the Christmas holiday season. Now, the lighting was very good in there, which was why homework was okay to do. And in regard to the holidays, the large picture windows across the front of the house facing the street were in that room. And as such, it was where we always placed our Christmas tree for maximum viewing pleasure for anybody that happened to wander by on that rural country road. Now, during such time as the room was decorated for Christmas, I like to go and sit in the dark, the only light coming from the heavily decorated tree and accompanying windows. This was completely okay with my mother, as long as I didn't make a mess or put my feet on any of the furniture. That'd get you kicked out of there quick. So, excuse me, sounded like a good deal to me. And I spent many a winter's evening around this time of year in the good living room, dreaming about what I was going to get in the way of Christmas presents. And you was there. Life was sure good to a kid in the early 1970s. At least it was for this kid. Now, the first time I noticed the anomaly I came to refer to as the Christmas feather, I was probably about 3 or 4 years old. I can remember being in the good living room, admiring the tree. My mother always insisted that we go all out for Christmas, and we always had a giant tree that resplendent with lighted star topper almost brushed the 10-foot ceilings. Add in yards of garland, hundreds of winking colored lights, dozens of blown glass hand painted ornaments, and dripping with faux icicles, and you get the idea of what the tree looked like. It was
Sounds
beautiful.
beautiful.
Yeah, it was beautiful and a wonderful sight to behold as a small child or as an adult. But as a small child, it was not just a thing of beauty, but of magic and the joy that the season brought. So while lying on the couch enjoying the holiday spectacle of the tree and had a use an Andy Williams or Percy Faith or Perry Como album on the console stereo in there, I was just basking in the glow of the seasonal magic. At one point, I happened to roll over on my back on the couch so that I could watch the reflections of the lights twinkle on the ceiling. And then suddenly I saw something hovering just in my peripheral vision, just above me on the couch. I sat straight up and looked directly overhead, trying to get a better view. There above me was a lone gossamer feather, perhaps 2, maybe 3 inches long, pure white, and looked very fragile and translucent. It didn't look like all the robin or occasional crow feathers that I sometimes found in the yard. Now, I didn't know it at the time, but later in life I was able to verify that it was similar in appearance to goose down, although we never owned any down comforters or pillows or jackets or anything filled with feathers, due in part to my childhood allergies and also in part to my mom's germophobia. And when I did find those mentioned robin or crow feathers, I was forbidden for bringing them into the house and would receive a rather stern lecture about how birds carry disease and there were such things as bird mites and those feathers found out in the yard were undoubtedly crawling with them, so I should go wash my hands immediately. So I watched this mysterious feather as it turned languid spirals in the air and seemed to float at random throughout the room. I would sometimes lose sight of it. The ceiling was painted brilliant white as well, only to observe it pop up later in another corner of the room. I would also like to take the opportunity to state that we had no furnace, no central air, and no fireplaces. Again, due to my allergies, I was particularly allergic to dust. But when my father commissioned the house built when I was 6 months old, he insisted on what was at the time, this is in the early 60s, a fairly modern concept of ceiling heat or seal heat, which works by heated strips laid in the very sheetrock of the ceiling. While not very efficient, since heat moves upward by natural and physical law, it didn't cause problems with my allergies. Also, I want to point out here that being installed in the ceiling, it didn't create any updrafts associated with a furnace or a forced air heater, and therefore was not what was keeping the mystery feather aloft. So I can remember watching this feather for what seemed like hours. I was mesmerized by the aerial maneuvers and the way it would do things like circle the Christmas tree as if it either possessed a mind of its own or was being controlled by an unseen hand. I kept the feather as my own personal Christmas secret, lest my mother discover its existence and do away with it. Although there were times we were all gathered in the good living room, including not only my parents, but my brother's wife and child when they came to visit, I never observed the feather unless I was the only one in the room. Now, there were a few instances where I boldly tried to catch it, and I say boldly because it took a certain amount of boldness to climb on the back of the couch or one of the overstuffed high-back chairs to try and grab the feather, which always seemed to stay in the 8 to 10-foot height range. My mother would have at least banned me from the good living room and, at worst, applied a hand swiftly to my backside had she witnessed such a transgression on her furniture. The oddest thing about the feather was that I only saw it around the holidays. Any other time I was in the good living room, studying, for example, the feather was nowhere to be found, no matter how long and hard I watched the ceiling, waiting for it to appear. However, sometime after Thanksgiving, as soon as our decorations began to go up, the feather would return. I saw it during its yearly occurrence for several years, but oddly enough, the feather seemed to have disappeared for good about the time I turned 10 or 11. In other words, as soon as I was big enough to have captured it. Now, flash forward about 40 years later, more than that now, since I wrote this. I've never forgotten about the feather and the mystery and awe I experienced, but I'm sure it was resting comfortably in the back of my mind. It was not the sort of thing I would sit and think about constantly by any means. Now, while collecting stories for my first book, Strange Things in the Woods, I'd spoken with a gentleman about my age who'd had some unusual outdoor stories he wanted to tell. I dutifully recorded the stories and thanked him, and as a matter of habit, just asked him if he had any other unusual experiences. Well, there is one, he intoned solemnly, but it didn't happen in the woods, so I'm not sure you'd want to hear it. So I explained that even though it wouldn't fit within the scope of this book, I'd still love to hear any tale he wished to tell me. And then he began relating a story about a Christmas feather. And a feather, Cisco, is what you could have knocked me over with when that story came pouring out. It was so similar to my own experience that it was frightening. Now, he finished his story, he even choked up a little bit, and he closed by stating that he believed with all his heart that the feather he encountered was the spirit of his deceased grandfather coming to wish him a happy holiday. He even claimed that his grandfather had once told him as a child that when he passed away, he would come back to him as a feather.
Wow.
I thanked the man for the story and gathered my things and left. It was such a tender moment that there was no way I could blurt out, yeah, that happened to me too, without feeling of cheapening the moment when the man really estranged me. He just, poured out a part of his
I'd have been
childhood.
stunned. You're stunned, but those are our validations.
And although I had no idea how he felt about the afterlife or feathers, my maternal grandfather passed away right after the holidays when I was just a few months old. Could it be? I've often asked myself after hearing this man's story. I can't say for sure, but I'm not one to rule out anything. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Wow. Ain't that something?
True story.
Yeah,
we got just enough time to close it up and get out of here. Tell people where they can find you at.
Sure, absolutely. I don't know. I'm lost. Journey Through the Gate. You can find me on Rumble under Cisco, Sysco on Rumble. Get over there and like the channel and hit that notification bell because we're going to be having some shows. The next one I'm going to have over there, I think I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on in New Jersey with all these drones and everything, gathered up all the information. So as far as I can tell right now is everybody that's talking doesn't know, or they think they know and talking out of the wrong end, or you're making up some kind of nonsense to throw at us. And we're going to try to keep a straight eye on it and see what's going on because it's nuts. Something's going on. Maybe we're getting aliens for Christmas. Who knows?
Santa Claus conquers the Martians.
Right. Journey Through the Gate. Yeah, I'm sorry. Journey Through the Gate's over there on YouTube, and you can catch us there too. Sunday night, Monday night, 8 p.m. And Steve is on with me on Monday nights, and no telling what we're going to be talking about. Yeah. But we have a good time.
And check out the book, We're All Children in the Wilderness of the Afterlife, a guided story through a haunted life. Cisco's personal stories there.
There you go. You can get it on Amazon in ebook or paperback, and Steve's in there too. He helped. He co-wrote it with me, and we had a good time doing that. And I'll tell you what, that story about my mom is in there, and lots of stories of Steve too. Yeah, and mostly I want to say, just to validate yours, Steve, before we leave. Bad day the day before, looking for a little encouragement. And I sat in my car, unlocked it, got in, sat in my car. Nobody else got a key to my car. And sitting on the dashboard right there by my dials, in my sight through my steering wheel, is one perfect gossamer white feather.
Wow. How about that? I think they're often used for that. And coins.
Yeah. Yep.
We'll get into that at another time.
Yep. We'll do signs another time. But keep in mind, folks, we're not saying that your grandma came back as a grasshopper. What they can do is there's certain things like butterflies.
They can send the grasshopper to check you out or to let you know.
Yep. But they can manipulate, and that's usually what's going on. So don't worry, your grandmother's not a feather. So Merry Christmas. Believe in miracles because they do happen. And try to find some real joy, even if it's for a moment this season. Take a little time for yourself, and you know, just believe. What if why not? What's the harm in going a positive direction if you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There you go. I love y'all. Love you, Steve.
Me too, Cisco. We'll see you Monday night. Everybody have a good one. We'll see you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. On behalf of Cisco and myself, we'll see you a little further on down the trail. Tell your animals we said hi. Good night, everybody.
Good night.